That doesn't change from yesterday to today. We're finding the y-intercept, then we're plugging in 0 for the x's. So I get 0 plus 2 times 0 minus 4. Make sure, notice what I did. I have a negative in front of a parenthesis, so I rewrote it as a -1. I would do that on last night's assignment also, just so that you keep track of that negative sign. Okay? So 0 plus 2 is 2. 0 minus 4 is -4. -1 times 2 is -2. -2 times -4 gives me a +8. As always, we want to make sure that we are taking notes. All right, that gives me what ordered pair? 0, perfect. Questions there? So that doesn't change, right? Those two steps are still the same between yesterday and up to today. What changes is on our step 3, we're going to pull the x-intercepts. Now, the x-intercepts are what? Yeah, y is equal to 0. So what I want you to notice is if y is already equal to 0, we can come back here. In intercept form, this is already factored. Meaning if I set y equal to 0, then all I would have to do is set these parentheses equal to 0 and solve. Well, if I set these parentheses equal to 0 and solve, then your x-intercepts are always going to be p comma 0 and q comma 0. Why did I take the opposite sign? Because you'd have to add p to both sides to get that. Yes?
How did you get 8 and a -4?
It's -1 times 2 is -2 times the -4.
Oh.
All right. So, everybody, are we good with why those are the x-intercepts always? All right. So then moving through, x-intercept in my particular example here is going to be a -2, 0, and a 4, 0. Because to get a 0 in this parenthesis, you have to have -2. 0 in this parenthesis would be a 4. Does that make sense for that pull down?
Yeah, so like whatever sign you have, it's always the opposite.
Yeah, because if I set that equal to 0, I have to subtract it.
Okay.
Okay? Like I said, this is the step we add on Friday, but it'll be a little bit more complicated in the other two formats. In this format, it's fine. All right, so step number 4 is vertex. Vertex, before we get into this, let's go ahead and plot what we have so far so that you can see why the vertex is what it is. So let's go ahead and sort of write out our graph. I have a y-intercept at 0, 8. That y-intercept is not your vertex. You cannot have that being your vertex. So I'm going to go up to 8 and put a dot. Then I have an x-intercept at -2, so I'm going to put a dot there. And I have an intercept at 4, so I'm going to do a dot there. Again, your y-intercept is not your vertex, which means I'm going to come up and I'm going to peak somewhere up here before I turn back around, and the question is where. But if you remember, we have a axis of symmetry that cuts down the middle, right? And we said that everything that's horizontal from each other is equal distance from that axis of symmetry. So we would have an axis of symmetry somewhere in this middle so that these two zeros are equal distance away from that. So in order to find that vertex, to find that spot, we're going to take the halfway point. So that's sort of our procedure, is to take the halfway point between P and Q. So how do I find a halfway? We're going to take the first x value, add it with the second x value, and divide by 2. In my case over here, that means I'm going to take -2 plus 4 and divide it by 2. -2 plus 4 gives me 2. Divided by 2 gives me 1. That is just an x value of your vertex. So just like when we had to use a formula before, we had to plug that back in. So if I'm looking for the y value, then I have to plug in that x value that I just found in order to complete it. But what that means is that right here at 1 is where that y, that x value is going to be. And you can kind of see that 1 is halfway in between, right? Okay, so going through, we're going to plug that back into my original problem. So I end up with a -1 times 1 plus 2 times 1 minus 4. That gives me -1 times 3 times -3. -1 times 3 is -3 times by another -3 gives me +9. That ordered pair is 1, 9. Which means if I go up to 1, I have to go up to 9 and put a dot. Draw my axis of symmetry down. What is the label for my axis of symmetry? Because that's still step number 5. What's my label? Yeah.
X equals 1.
X equals 1. You can still reflect your y-intercept. So this y-intercept is 1 unit away, which means I can go the 1 unit away in the other direction and get another 8. And notice I now get a more complete picture of what this looks like. So with those x-intercepts, I can now draw this in a better way. And like I said on Friday, we'll do x-intercepts if I'm not in intercept form. That's the only thing we really add, besides a little bit of definitions as well.
That says label axis.
Symmetry. Yeah. Are there any questions with that last format? So, like I said, that's the conclusion of our notes until Friday. Yeah.
So is the vertex 1, 9 or 0, 8?
0, 8 is the y-intercept. 1, 9 is the vertex. Okay? And like I said, I noticed that that was a question this morning when people were coming in. We were mixing those two things up. It's pretty rare that the y-intercept is also a vertex. Normally they're different. Okay, so what I'd like you to do at this point is go ahead and take out the 4 problems that you were supposed to start last night.
We're done with the notes.
We're done with notes.